Welcome back for another deep dive with us. This time, we're going exploring some Gaelic folklore. And specifically,
Oh,
we've got an excerpt from an essay called Sheltered by Shadows, A Journey of Reclamation by Jaime Hoerricks.
okay.
And this essay is really just
Reclamation.
yeah, it's packed with all these thought-provoking ideas about identity and colonialism and finding strength in unexpected places. And all this is kind of seen through this really fascinating lens of the Ghillie Dhu. And one of the things that really caught my eye was how Horrocks challenges this like traditional image of the Ghillie Dhu,
Okay.
moving beyond that, simple dark-haired lad portrayal that we so often see. I'm really excited to unpack all of this with you today.
Yeah, the traditional portrayal you mentioned is a great starting point, I think, because it actually reflects a much bigger issue,
Mhm.
the impact of colonialism on Gaelic culture. Horrocks even argues that the name Ghillie Dhu was mistranslated, and that stripped away its original depth and complexity.
Yeah, it's almost as if colonizers tried to control not just the land, but how people understood their own culture.
Exactly. Horrocks points out that simplifying and categorizing Gaelic beliefs was a way for colonizers to impose their own frameworks and assert dominance. It's a powerful example of how cultural narratives can be manipulated and reshaped over time.
Absolutely. So instead of that simplified image, how does Horrocks reinterpret the Ghillie Dhu?
Well, Horrocks envisions the Ghillie Dhu as a maternal protective figure, and they emphasize that this isn't about inventing a new interpretation, but reclaiming a lost one. It's about returning to a worldview where beings are defined by their purpose and their connection to the land, and not by labels imposed from the outside.
This idea of reclamation really resonates with me, and I think it's something a lot of us can relate to, maybe not with folklore specifically, but with aspects of our own identities or heritage. Have you ever felt the need to reclaim something that felt lost or distorted?
Yeah, absolutely. Reclaiming our narratives can be so empowering because it allows us to take ownership of our own stories and redefine what they mean to us.
Totally. So Horrocks then dives into this concept of shadow, which, is often seen as negative or frightening, but they kind of flip that on its head and talk about shadows as places of sanctuary and transformation. And what I found really powerful was how they connect this to their own personal experiences as a trans autistic individual.
Yeah, Horrocks describes finding strength and growth in the shadows, particularly during their journey of self-discovery before coming out as trans. They write, "The shadow was where I tested my courage, where I began to weave the fabric of my identity." And it really challenges us to rethink our assumptions about what shadows represent and how they can shape us.
It's like they're saying that sometimes the most profound growth happens in those hidden spaces where we can truly be ourselves, away from all those external pressures and expectations.
Yes, and they acknowledge that this doesn't romanticize the struggle. Horrocks points out that for many marginalized people, those shadows are not chosen, but imposed, reflecting the forces that try to silence and erase their experiences.
That's such a crucial point. It reminds us that the shadow can be a double-edged sword. It can be a place of refuge and growth, but also a space where people are forced to hide or suppress parts of themselves. Makes you think about those times when maybe you felt in the shadows in your own life, whether by choice or by circumstance. What did those experiences teach you?
Hmm, it's a really thought-provoking question. Those periods of uncertainty or even isolation, they can be incredibly formative, shaping how we see ourselves and the world around us.
For sure. And Horrocks takes this whole exploration of shadow even further by connecting it to their creative process as a writer and poet. It's like they're weaving those threads of darkness and light into something beautiful and powerful through their art.
Absolutely. And they specifically mention how hormone replacement therapy unlocked these new avenues of creative expression for them. That connection between personal transformation and these artistic breakthroughs is fascinating to me. It speaks to this idea that our creativity is deeply intertwined with our lived experiences and our sense of self.
Yeah, I love that perspective. It reminds me of a line from their poem, Sheltered by Shadows. That really resonated with me. But safety whispers, too, of its cost. The gilly murmured, "To grow, you must leave the shade." It captures that tension between seeking comfort and embracing growth so perfectly.
That line really gets to the heart of the matter, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes to truly flourish, we have to step outside of our comfort zones, even when it feels risky. It's like a seedling pushing through the soil to reach the sunlight.
That's a beautiful analogy. And thinking back to Herrick's interpretation of the Ghillie Dhu, it's interesting how this figure isn't just a protector, but also a guide, urging us to leave the shadows when we're ready. It's almost like a metaphor for that process of self-discovery and personal evolution.
I see that too. As if the Ghillie Dhu embodies both the comfort and challenge
Yeah.
that come with navigating our own paths. That duality is so central to the human experience.
Definitely. And Hoerricks doesn't stop at the personal level. They connect this idea of reclaiming the Ghillie Dhu to a broader discussion of reclaiming cultural heritage. They talk about finding strength and comfort in reconnecting with the stories and symbols of their ancestors.
And they acknowledge the complexities of that process, right? They
Mm.
talk about the need to peel back layers of interpretation that might have been imposed, through colonialism, to rediscover the true essence of those cultural fragments.
It's like they're saying that reclaiming our heritage isn't about clinging to the past, but about actively engaging with it, reinterpreting it for the present. It's about honoring the legacy we've inherited while also shaping it for the future.
That's a really powerful way to frame it. And it leads to the final and perhaps most impactful idea in the essay, the idea that the journey of reclaiming what was lost isn't an end in itself, but a beginning.
That gives me chills. What do you think Hoerricks means by that?
I think it's an invitation to consider what this beginning might look like in our own lives. What narratives do we need to reclaim? What shadows do we need to navigate? And how can we honor the legacy of those who came before us, while also forging our own paths?
Those are incredible questions to ponder. It makes this essay so much more than just an academic exploration of folklore. It becomes a reflection on the human experience, on identity, resilience, and the constant process of becoming.
Yeah, it really makes you realize that our stories, both personal and collective, are always evolving. We're not just inheritors of the past, we're also shaping it for the future.
Right, and Hoerricks reminds us that we each have a role to play in this ongoing process of reclamation and transformation.
So I'm curious, what are some ways that you see people actively engaging in this process in their own lives?
Well, it can take so many forms. I mean, it might be through creative expression like Hoerricks' poetry, or through, activism and advocating for social change. It could even be as simple as living authentically and challenging harmful narratives in our everyday interactions. Those are all such powerful ways to contribute to this larger tapestry of meaning. And speaking of powerful way, we can't wrap up this deep dive without revisiting that incredible closing sentence from the essay. The journey to reclaim what was lost is not an end in itself, it is a beginning. It's such a simple statement, but it's packed with so much depth.
It really is. It's like an invitation to keep exploring, keep questioning, if we keep pushing the boundaries of what we think we know. It reminds us that this process of reclamation is ongoing and that the real magic lies in the journey itself.
It makes me think about how much potential there is for growth and discovery when we're willing to embrace those shadows and step into the unknown and listen to those whispers of wisdom from the past. Just like the Ghillie Dhu, we might find strength and guidance in unexpected places.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Who knows what we might uncover if we're open to those possibilities?
What journeys of reclamation might we embark on? What hidden truths might we find? What legacies might we leave behind for those who come after us?
It's exciting to think about, isn't it? Like maybe in the process of seeking those answers, we'll discover that we've been transformed along the way.